And finally, and this is the last bit from me, I'd like to reintroduce Jim McAuslan, the General Secretary of the British Airline Pilots Association, who's going to give the final speech and sum up our conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Julian, and thank you for your attendance today. What I would like to do is just to give some reflections on what I have learned over the past 48 hours and what I think we may collectively have learned, and perhaps to give some suggestions about where we go next. I think I would feel probably unfulfilled were we just to come here, sit back and enjoy some erudite discussion and then nothing to happen as a result of it. So I want to give some reflections on perhaps where we go next. But I've got 4 key questions that have formed in my mind over the past 48 hours. And those are, firstly, the first key question, is there a problem? And I think undoubtedly, listening to what's been said from the rostrum and from the questions from the floor, that the answer is yes. That there's a problem, that we hear story after story, study after study, testimony after testimony, that there's a problem. It's a problem that's come from across the world, from 4 continents we've heard, and in addition, it's one that's come from diverse industries, a transferable problem, whether it's sheep dip or whether it's in aviation. So there is a problem. Of that, there appears to be no doubt. The second key question that I would pose is it happening in the workplace? For us, as a pilot association, the aircraft? And the answer, undoubtedly, must be yes, listening to what the speakers have said. The third question, then, is can we measure it? What is happening and what effect is it having? And from what I've heard from all the speakers, the answer to that question, those questions, must also be yes. And fourthly, can it be put right? And particularly from the sessions this afternoon, or the presentations that we've had, the answer to that is also yes. So why, when we know the answers to those questions, are we still here today discussing it and arguing it? We have a message for those who work in aviation, and that is that you're not alone, that flight safety can be compromised if we're not safety. This is just not a long-term health issue. For those flying, and we have examples in the room today, they have come very close to being faced with a major calamity and disaster because of the effects of what's happening. So this is a very real safety issue as well as a long-term health issue as well. And we say to those people, and to those many people in aviation, you're not alone. We say, make sure you report it, make sure that we have that evidence. And we've heard some of the concern that people have expressed about actually reporting it, about saying that perhaps I'm oversensitive or perhaps putting your job on the line. And we say, make sure you report it. And that's one of the campaigns that our association is running to make sure the aircrew report events that they experience. And I want to say, and say this particularly to Stuart Caldwell, flying is safe. You can fly safely. It is the safest form of transportation, only because we take safety very seriously. And we want to make sure that we continue flying safely. But there's a question that I would put, and a message I give to those responsible for public health, that what we've heard over the past 48 hours is it's a very real issue beyond flight safety and beyond flight crew and beyond cabin crew. It's an issue for today's passengers, and I think the issue that caused me most concern is it's those as yet unborn, some of the experiences from those who've been working in sheepdip, what happens to the unborn child, to the pregnant mother as a result of this. So I think those in public health should not pass this on to some transport department or some regulator. This is an issue in which society has a responsibility, and those in government have a responsibility to look at today's passengers and tomorrow's passengers. And all we say to them is get us in a room together. Some of the experiences, talking as you talk round conferences, listening to other experiences of people who have been campaigning on other issues in a previous life, get us in a room together and we can sort it out. If you had done that over coal dust and pneumosilicosis, if you'd done it over asbestosis, we have not had the tragedies that we had in people's lives. Get us in a room together, whatever part of industry you're from, and we can sort it out, I am sure. So what should we do? There's some themes, and I don't put these up as a rigid agenda. What we might be doing, however, I think falls into a number of categories. Firstly, I think we could probably do more to measure the extent of the problem. And the last speaker and the Okra project is fascinating, to measure the extent of the problem and what happens during an incident. Perhaps we can do better together to look at that. Development of supportive medical protocols. The GPs, the physicians who reported, talked about how they've gone about measuring what has happened. I'm sure that we could learn from each other, and it was good to see that the medics got together and perhaps they could look at some sort of protocol that could standardise the way in which affected flight crew report their incidents. That we'd like to have more clarity with our regulators on the application of standards and enforcement. The point was made by, again, my legal friend from America, about there are these things that exist, 25831, if my memory serves me well. Why can't we have that shared as a common understanding with regulators? And if that is the regulation, how do we enforce it? We shouldn't be arguing about nif-naf and trivia when that sort of regulation exists. So perhaps we could do more together in the industry to be clear about what those regulations say, how they're applied, and how we enforce them. And it was good to see the contributions from those involved in the design of retrofitting. But it's a pity that we do not have aircraft designers present today. And it's something that we'd very much like to do to press for more influence in aircraft design. I'd like to think that the 787, the 7E7, that the design has come about because of bleed-free air as being the underpinning factor that's brought about that redesign. I'm not so sure. If it were, perhaps other aircraft that are being designed by Airbus, for instance, would have had it incorporated as standard. That does not appear to be the practice. So I think there's still an argument to be run here to make sure that aircraft design is being got right from the outset. And finally, and I think perhaps it might not all be wholesome, that we need to also look at some of our legal activity and perhaps putting some pressure on insurance companies so that they are aware that we have their card marked, so to speak, that if they're not careful and do not put pressure on commercially with designers and with aircraft companies, then they will be finding us coming, hounding them at a later date. So perhaps we should share some notes on some legal activity that will help us put pressure. So as well as what we should be doing, how should we be doing it? Our aim in helping host this was to join up the international community looking at this issue. And in that respect, we feel very rewarded and pleased with what's happened. I don't want to see any structures emerge. My experience working in trade unions is the minute you put a structure in place, the issue grinds to a halt. So I very much welcome the rather anarchic but loose coalitions that seem to create far better solutions than any structures that are put in place. So I would really encourage people to be involved in loose coalitions, and that's certainly what we are hoping to do tomorrow back at BALPA headquarters for those that are involved with this. We'd also drafted a joint communique, which we're asking, and it's been a bit presumptuous perhaps, but we'll be asking those who have spoken over the past 48 hours if they would be happy putting their name to it, and we'll have copies at the end for you to have a look at. And the communique would say that the undersigned were present at the International Aero Industry Conference on Contaminated Air Protection, Air Safety and Cabin Air Quality held in London 21 April 2005. We wish to bring to the urgent attention of government, aviation regulators and the airline and aerospace industry the following conclusions distilled from the conference. There is a workplace problem resulting in chronic and acute illness amongst flight crew, both pilots and cabin crew. The workplace in which these illnesses are being induced is the aircraft cabin environment. This, we conclude, is resulting in significant flight safety issues, in addition to unacceptable flight crew personnel health implications. Further, we are concerned that passengers may also be suffering from similar symptoms to those exhibited by flight crew. We urgently call upon government, industry and regulators to work in partnership with cabin environment, medical and analyst specialists and representatives from flight crew unions to analyse, quantify and remedy the cabin air quality problems that we've identified exist. And we'll be tabling that if our our speakers are happy to sign that with the UK government and with any other government that you would like to have involved in this project. But we'd like to, in particular, make sure that we involve governments and industry in finding solutions. If I could perhaps be slightly challenging, that when some of the questions came from the floor from those on the industry side, there is perhaps a born out of experience, perhaps, a tendency to say there and there. Unless we can get people together in the room together, we're not going to sort this out. So our arms are open to embrace everyone in trying to find solutions. BALPA itself has its own aims for this campaign, which is to research and collate scientific and medical data relating to contaminated air and to work with the industry to identify solutions. So what we should do, how we should do it. Finally, who should do it? And I thank Moira Summers, Dr. Moira Summers, yesterday for some of the questions that she said that she posed for herself before she engaged in doing the work with flight crew and looking at their medical effects in Western Australia. And each of us, I think, needs to ask these questions. One, am I going to make myself available to be involved in this? It's a huge personal commitment. Secondly, am I willing to do difficult and complex work? I found it very challenging trying to keep pace with the scientists over the past 2 days, and I don't pretend that I've managed that. Thirdly, am I prepared to work outside my comfort area, to go into new areas that I haven't looked at before, and to be challenged in a way that I haven't been before? And finally, am I prepared through all that to stay independent and open to ideas, even if they challenge my own orthodoxy? So the three issues are what we do, how we do it, and who does it. Some thanks to conclude, if I may perhaps repeat what Julian has said. My first thanks to Corinne and to all the people at Neil Stewart Associates who have put together a very professional event, and I think I'm very pleased with the way in which the conference has gone in terms of a process as well as the issues that we've explored. Secondly, to thank our speakers who have journeyed from all over the world to be here. We really do appreciate it. To thank our co-sponsors, BALPA's co-sponsors, EOPIS, Paul and Sofrance, for the work that they have done in helping us put this conference together. To thank Julian for chairing it so effectively and so well. And finally, to thank the many unnamed sufferers from across the world who have stepped forward to give the evidence that's enabled us to get together today. Theirs must have been a painful journey, but we do appreciate it as well. Thank you very much.